If you're looking for a no-compromise lift kit for your 2024 and newer Tacoma, Eibach has got your solution here with the Stage 2 Coilover Kit. This is a bolt-on kit that's going to replace your shocks and springs while giving you adjustability, excellent ride quality, additional height, and overall better performance for a solid price. Now, just a quick note on fitment before we dive in. This kit is designed to fit 2024 and newer Tacomas that are not equipped with the adaptive variable suspension or rear leaf springs. And it is also not compatible with Trail Hunter or TRD Pro models. The mentioned suspension to any enthusiast, and Eibach will likely come to their mind pretty quickly. They're one of the leaders in suspension technology and development, and they've been making components for all manner of vehicles for over 70 years. So it's safe to say, when these kits come through the door, I am always eager to get my hands on them. Now, first and foremost, this is going to give your truck more height in the front and rear, essentially functioning as both a lift and leveling kit. The front coilovers are height adjustable, and you can just adjust them using the threaded perch down on the bottom here. Now, these can be run anywhere from about a half an inch of lift over stock up to about 2.5 inches of total lift in the front, so it gives you a lot of adjustability. Now, you will also get about 1 inch of additional height in the rear thanks to the new springs. With everything set to its highest setting up front, you can fit 33-inch tires without rubbing issues or having to make other modifications. However, if you have really wide tires or a high offset wheel though, plan on having to do some minor trimming. Otherwise, 33s should fit without a problem. Also important to note that if you're going to run the front coilovers at a lower height setting, you'll need to adjust your tire sizes accordingly. Now, since these are coilovers, they come fully assembled just as you see them right here on the table. So you've got new springs, new top mounts, and lower bushings, making them a totally bolt-in solution. And they come packed with all the benefits of Eibach's Pro-Truck Coil-Over 2.0s. These are a nitrogen-charged monotube damper setup that's designed to give you a great balance of ride quality and control. So whether you're running down the street or the trail, your truck's going to feel really good. Now, that is thanks to the variable force valving technology they have built in here, and that utilizes a specially designed valve stack inside of the damper to smooth out bumps and allow you to stay in control of the truck. That also allows for increased overall travel too, especially since you're able to adjust the height and you're getting more of it. And if you didn't want to pony up the additional funds when you bought your truck for, say, a Trail Hunter or a TRD Pro, these are going to get you most of the way there, and you're going to spend a lot less doing it. Now, out in the rear, you also get a set of matching Pro-Truck 2.0 shocks and springs. These will match up perfectly with the coilovers in the front. Now, the rear setup is not height adjustable, but it will give you about an extra inch of overall height. That's going to help level out the stance of your truck, making sure that it sits nice and even front to rear. Now, like the coilovers up front, the shocks and springs ensure that everything stays buttoned up properly for street or trail use. These, like the front shocks, are designed to stand up to heavier loads, making them perfect for a truck that sees overlanding duty or one that's going to haul some stuff out off the beaten path. But it will also help keep the truck's ride quality and general road matters controlled out on the street, so getting to your campsite won't be a chore, and then once you get off the beaten path, you'll have plenty of capability to go where you want to. Construction, as you might expect, is also a standout. The bodies of the shocks are made from 6061 T6 billet aluminum, and all the mounting points are anodized black for a cool look and some extra protection. Now, inside here, you're going to find 46mm pistons, heavy-duty zinc-coated cylinders, and a nitro steel shaft. The springs are made from your typical cold wound steel, and they're finished in a nice silver powder coat to give them additional rust and corrosion protection. Plus, you've got new gaiters for the rear, you get new bushings both front and rear, and you've got these billet spacers down there as well, plus some aluminum top hats too. So this is, again, a really solid kit, especially considering the price. Now, pricing comes in at about $1,600, which for a full coilover kit like this one is actually a pretty good value, especially considering you're getting adjustable height coils for the front, plus all new shocks and springs on all four corners. It is a serious price, but this is also a serious bit of kit, and the value can't be understated here. To get this kind of feature set from other lift kits, you'd likely have to spend quite a bit more in most cases. So if you've got the funds that you can spare, this is a really great way to make your truck capable off-road and very nice on-road too. Installation gets a 2 out of 3 on our difficulty meter, and the job should take you around 3 hours to complete. While this is a bolt-on operation that will simply replace your factory struts and rear shocks, and there's no need for a spring compressor, getting in there and getting everything adjusted will take some time, so plan for that. But overall, this is pretty straightforward. You don't need to do any permanent modifications to the truck. You can just unbolt your old stuff and put this right in its place. And we're gonna walk you through the process step by step right now, so let's head on out to the shop and get to it.
For this install, you will need a hammer, a 3/8 impact, various pry bars, a 3/8 ratchet, various 14 mil wrenches, a 19 mil wrench. You'll need a 10, 12, 17, 19, 22, and a 24 mil socket, various vice grips, various pliers, and a side cutter. You will also need a Phillips head screwdriver and a panel removal tool. Also, not shown on camera, you will need a set of jack stands and a floor jack. Today we're going to be installing a front and rear coilover kit on a Tacoma. Let's get started. All right, the first thing we're going to do is remove our both cotter pins from our upper control arm ball joint and also our lower tie rod. We're going to remove this with a pair of side cutters or a flathead if you need one. Now we're going to remove our speed sensor bolt and also the bracket that holds onto it. We have a 10mm bolt that's holding the wheel speed sensor onto the actual knuckle, and also a 12mm bolt just above it. All right, using our 10 mil, we can get the wheel speed sensor off. And that should just come out pretty easy. There is an O-ring inside there. You might need a flathead to pull that out, but if you could just wiggle it and pull it right out. All right, now we can move on to our upper bolt. It's a 12mm. Set that off to the side. All right, we're gonna remove the two 12mm bolts that hold on the bracket right here. Break that one loose, and then get to this one right here. And we have one more bolt on the top right here that's a 12mm. All right, now that we have the wheel speed sensor loose, we can actually move this off to the side or just out of the way just for now until we get the other components out. All right, now we're gonna remove our 19mm upper control arm bolt with our 19 mil socket. Set this off to the side. And now we can move our outer tie rod, 24 mil socket on here. All right, now to get this out of the knuckle itself, you generally can use a press tool to push this down. We can now just use a hammer and smack this and shock the actual knuckle to let it fall out. All right, while taking the outer tie rod out, the top one actually came out as well, but we were gonna use this to pull this out. This is a special puller. You can also pick one of these up from your local auto parts store. We were gonna press that in there to push it out, but since it already came out, we can just take the bolt off. We're just gonna unthread our nut because that was holding it in place for us. And we can just let that sit off the side. All right, now that we have the lower control arm supported a bit with our floor jack, we're gonna undo our 22mm nut on this side for our strut and also the 22mm bolt for that side. But first we're gonna unloosen the nut side. Now we can unloosen our bolt. All right, you might need to lift and lower your jack to get the tension off of the bolt, but once you get it tapped through all the way, you should be able to just slide it right out. All right, now that we have the lower bolt out for our strut, we're going to move up to the upper section. There's two back in the corner that are hard to reach. So we're gonna go in there and break them loose with our 14mm wrench and then go back in with our ratcheting wrench to undo them all. One thing I will add is if you remove the rear two bolts first, it will relieve the weight off of the strut onto the front two, and that will make it easier for you to unthread with your ratcheting wrench or your fingers. All right, now we're gonna lower our jack to get our strut out. All right, once you have the strut assembly, you can repeat the same exact steps for the other side. All right, now we're moving to the front section with the help of a floor jack with the knuckle supported. We're gonna slide our strut assembly into the tower. Just note that this says towards the front wheel, so we're gonna point this side towards the wheel. Also, we're gonna use one of the hardware nuts just to thread it on there, just to keep it supported for us. All right, just let that sit there for now. Now we can push down on our lower control arm to get our bottom perch seated. Might need to use a pry bar and apply some pressure to get that fully seated in. Now we can use our floor jack just to get this lined up, and we're also going to need to install our spacers in between the collar of the seating. Now with the help of a flexible magnet, you can slide down your first spacer on the back side and get it in position, and just let that sit there. You can maneuver and adjust it however you need to. All right, you will need a pry bar to separate this a little bit to get the collar in. Once you get that started in between there, you can then tap the rest of it away in with a hammer. And once you have that fully tapped in, you can now use a screwdriver or any type of tool to get that lined up. And once you have that in place, you can run your bolt in. Once you have that fully tapped through, you can now put your nut on the other side just to keep it in place. All right, now that we have that in, we're going to install our upper control arm into the knuckle assembly. Now we can use a pry bar and press down on our upper control arm so we can get our nut started. All right, now we can tighten up our upper control arm ball joint nut with our 19mm. All right, we just want to make sure I'm lined up so we can get our castle nut in, so we can get our cotter pin back in. Before you tighten that all the way fully, you're going to torque that down to spec. All right, now we can install the rest of our hardware for our top mount bolts. All right, now we can tighten the rear two first with our 14mm ratcheting wrench. All right, once those are tightened now, we can come back and torque that down to factory spec. All right, now we're going to install our wheel speed sensor bracket back to our upper control arm. Install that bolt there and also the one on the back side. And we can also attach the brake line bracket onto the knuckle. Now we can tighten this down with our 12mm socket. All right, just to get our tie rod out of the way for a bit, we're gonna push that back in and thread on our nut loosely, and we're gonna come back and tighten that up. This way we can get to our wheel speed sensor, install that into the sleeve, and also install our 10mm nut as well. And just behind the tie rod, we have one more 12mm nut for the bracket. We can tighten down our 12mm. And also tighten down our wheel speed sensor. Now we can install our castle nut on the tie rod, tighten that down using a 24mm socket. All right, you're going to line up your castle nut so you can install your cotter pin, and you're going to torque that down to spec. All right, now we can tighten up the nut side on our lower strut bolt with our 22mm socket. All right, once we get that nut tightened down, we're going to want to torque that down to spec. Now we can install our cotter pins, twist that and lock that into place. Now we can install our tie rod cotter pin. Just bend that tab over, keep it in place. All right, once we have everything installed and tightened down, we're gonna repeat the same exact process for the other side and make sure and torque everything down. All right, once we removed our rear wheel to get a little bit better access to our strut and rear assembly, we're going to undo this 19mm nut. We can do this by holding on a pair of vice grips at the top of the strut body. Just loosen it enough just to get some thread started. We're going to use that by helping the support of the weight from the axle so we can get a little pressure off of it. All right, first you can put your 19mm wrench on here and then clamp down your vice grips on the top. And with two hands, we're gonna hold the top end and squeeze and release that tension. All right, now we're gonna remove our sway bar end link up top. This is gonna be a 17mm bolt. Once you get this loose, you might need a pair of vice grips to get it all the way out because it's gonna keep spinning in there. And you can remove the end link from the mount. All right, now we're gonna come in here and remove this 12mm bolt for our ABS and our brake sensor harness, just to get some extra room when we drop the axle down a bit. Also, if you need to, the clip connections right here, you can get in there with a clip removal tool, get underneath and just pop that out of the way. Again, this is just to give you some more room when you drop the axle down. All right, now that we have the vehicle in the air a little bit, we have the rear axle supported by a pole jack. We're going to finish taking out the rear shock and loosen up that top nut all the way so it comes right out. Once again, we have our vice grips locked on and using our 19mm wrench. All right, now that we have the bolt all the way to the bottom of the threads, we can no longer grip up here anymore. So we're just gonna reach down here and slide the bushing up and just put a pair of vice grips and just grip lightly on there so we can finish taking off the nut. All right, now that we have the upper bolt out, we can move on to our lower mount and remove this with a 17mm socket. Just holding some support on it so it doesn't fall on top of you. And we can slide this off of the perch. You can wiggle this off, or you can spray some penetrating oil on here, or just use a pry bar just to shimmy it out. All right, now that we have our shock absorber out of the way, we can lower our axle to get our spring out. All right, once we have that out, we can set this to the side. All right, once we have our shock absorber assembly out and also the rear spring out, we can repeat all these steps for the other side and make sure everything's out of the way. All right, first we're gonna install our rear spring. We're gonna need to transfer over our rubber top hat over on top of the coil, and then now we can insert this into the assembly. All right, once you have the spring installed, you can make any adjustments you need necessary to get it fitted in there, and you can also lift and lower your axle to get it seated better properly in there. All right, now that we have the rear spring in, we're gonna install back our link into the mount. Once we get the nut started, we can tighten that down with a 17mm socket. Again, if this starts spinning on you, you can clamp this down with the vice grips and get that tightened down. We're gonna install the wider end opening over top of the bottom. You may need some silicone lubricant to get this all the way through, but it's gonna end up sitting in that position. Once we have the boot on our shock absorber, we can transfer over the old mounts from the factory. Slide this one on the bottom, slide your strut in, and slide this over top. Once we have that on top, we can put our locking nut on top and hold that into place. Now we can take the bottom of the shock and slide it onto our collar. You might need to go up or down with your axle assembly. And you can tighten your bolt down with a 17mm socket. All right, once you get to this point where the shock is installed a bit, you might want to jack up on your axle just enough where you can get some more threads to pop through so you can get your vice grip on the top. And once you got that started with your hand, you can now see the top of the mounting point where you can get your vice grips on top. All right, now that we have this all the way uncompressed, we can attach our vice grips right to the top and tighten this down with a 19mm wrench. Once you have the top tightened down, you can put your zip tie on to your rubber boot and trim this off with a pair of side cutters. All right, now we can install our 12mm nut for the bracket and tighten that down with our 12mm socket. And we can also attach the harness clip and push that back in. All right, once you have all that installed, you're gonna go back and torque everything down to factory spec, and then you're gonna repeat the same steps for the other side.
That's gonna wrap it up here for our review and install of the Eibach Pro-Truck 2.0 Coil-Over Kit fitting 2024 and newer Tacomas, excluding Trailhunter and TRD Pro models, as well as those equipped with the active adjustable suspension or rear leaf springs. Thanks so much for watching, and for everything Tacoma, keep it right here at ExtremeTerrain.com.